WNST, Towson, Baltimore, the Towson, Maryland Terrapins game this weekend. I got a guy out in Cincinnati, Ohio that calls college football for the Bearcats, which makes Brad Jackson and the roots of John Harbaugh probably very happy, as well as the seventh-year voice of the Cincinnati Bengals. We welcome Dan Hoard back onto the program. You can follow him and his golf pictures and golf game and family pictures out on Twitter at Dan_Hoard. That's Hoard. What's going on, man? As much mystery in Cincinnati as there is in Baltimore. Neither one of us know what to make of our offensive lines right now, do we?
Yeah, you are right about that. It's been an interesting off-season for the Bengals where that's concerned. They weren't very good up front last year, and they lost their top two guys. So that is definitely the big question mark going into this season. But I'll say this, Nestor, if the Bengals' offensive line is only adequate, it could be an excellent team because the skill position talent is unbelievable.
Well, you got running backs that can run the ball, and I know, the Mixon thing was just not going to happen here, given the Ray Rice history. And I know Marvin always has to throw this thing around with Duke and with the Brown family, but they brought in a guy who clearly has a troubled piece of video. But I guess if the plan goes right, he'll have 15, 20 touches on Sunday, right?
It'll be interesting to see. Technically, on the depth chart, they're listing him as the number 3 running back behind Jeremy Hill and Giovanni Bernard. But I think that is a nod to the veterans on paper. I think once the game begins, Joe Mixon's been the best guy they have in training camp, arguably one of the best in the NFL already, at least in terms of his raw talent. He has Jeremy Hill's physique and Giovanni Bernard's feet, which is a pretty potent combination. He's 228 pounds and he can fly. So I would be surprised if after maybe Jeremy Hill and Giovanni Bernard get a touch or two, the guy that gets the bulk of them isn't Joe Mixon.
Dan, what do we need to know about the Bengals? I mean, we see them twice a year. Obviously, this sort of mix and change. I would say the big thing here is Perfect and Pac-Man not being around, and to some point, Whitworth and Zeitler as well. The missing guys. But I look down on the depth chart, and there's plenty of Dunlops and plenty of guys that we're very, very familiar with. But the missing parts probably are the story this week if somehow the Ravens win this football game, right?
Well, that's certainly going to be a factor, particularly Burfict. Vontaze is playing for a contract this year. He's in tip-top shape. He had a phenomenal training camp and was great in the snaps that he got in the preseason. So that's a big loss. With Adam Jones, I'm not so sure. You might remember last year the number 1 draft pick, Will Jackson, missed the entire season. He tore a pectoral muscle in training camp and didn't play it down. So they basically got an extra first-round draft pick this year, and he has looked great. I think he's the best cover guy they have, so he will play right off the bat. He'll slide into Adam Jones' starting spot on Sunday, and I really don't think they'll miss much there. With Will Jackson and Drake Kirkpatrick, you've got 2 very competent NFL cornerbacks ready to go despite the absence of Adam in Game 1.
In the case of the Bengals offense and running the football, which I guess it will be their number 1 task to at least try to run the football against this Ravens front, certainly we've had no answer for A.J. Green for long, long stretches of time around here. And Jimmy Smith, healthy, our secondary better than it's been, the pass rush probably better, and certainly the run stop would be there. But A.J. Green has literally been the differentiator if I go back over the last 5-6 years of this rivalry, and it's always a rivalry, and it's weird coming there in September, right? I mean, usually we're coming in there watching the fireworks on New Year's Eve. We got it flipped around this year. But to see how the Ravens can stack up against this running game, because I think at heart the Bengals want to run the football, right?
Well, they want to, and they did in the regular season finale last year against the Ravens. Now, Baltimore's a little beat up at the end of the year, but the Bengals were able to get a 100-yard game out of Rex Burkhead, which he turned into a nice contract from the New England Patriots. So they will definitely try it this Sunday, but getting back to A.J. Green, the Ravens got to dodge him both times last year. He missed the second half of the season. He missed both Baltimore games, so you might not have to try to run it quite as much when you've got number 18 to throw it to, and he's another guy that's had a tremendous camp. I think he's looked better this camp than he's ever looked before, and that's saying something considering we're talking about a guy who's on track to be a Hall of Famer someday.
Dan Hoard joining us here. He is the voice of the Cincinnati Bengals as well as the Cincinnati Bearcats. You can follow him at Dan_Hoard, which brings me to my favorite topic. I think you know of my incredible love and affinity and affection for Marvin Lewis and our ongoing 2.5-decade friendship here now as we get into this. Every year people come to me and they know how well I know Marvin. They're like, well, this is going to be his last year. I think that started like around 2005 or 6. It's been going on forever. I mean, here's a guy that in that town town for that franchise and what that franchise represents. He's as good as it's ever been there, and that it always feels like he's 16 games away from not being there, and yet he's always there, isn't he?
He is, and the storyline of is Marvin on the hot seat, is this his last year? It's really only a story, or more of a story outside of Cincinnati than it is inside of Cincinnati for two reasons. Number one, I think fans here recognize the relationship that he has with his boss, Mike Brown, which is as close probably as any owner-coach relationship in the NFL. Secondly, fans here who have been here for a while remember how ugly it was before Marvin Lewis took the job. Before Marvin took the job, people said, you'll never get a good coach in Cincinnati. It's a catastrophe. It's the Siberia of the NFL. Well,
we thought that in Baltimore, by the way, too, and then they brought Buck Showalter in, and it is amazing what good leadership does everywhere, right?
No question.
From what Harbaugh represents in Michigan to what DJ Durkin going down and winning in Texas. I mean, we talk about the Patriots. It's all Belichick, right? And the other than Belichick, Marvin has had the continuity to get this team every year. You think they can win 10 games, and if you can win 10 games, you can be dangerous, right?
Absolutely. And when you think about the division with two traditional powerhouse teams in Pittsburgh and Baltimore, well, both of those teams have been to the playoffs 6 times in the last 9 years. So has Cincinnati. So in a division with these two great, historically tough franchises, the Bengals are keeping pace. Now, they haven't had the postseason success, obviously, but they're getting there year after year after year, and sooner or later they're going to kick that door down. I think it would have happened 2 years ago if Andy Dalton had not broke his thumb with 4 games to go. They were the number 1 seed in the AFC at the time. They were playing as well as any team in football. They were going to have postseason success, and they lost the starting quarterback.
Well, the craziest thing is the backup won the game for him. I mean, that's, lost in all of this was how well McCarron played. You might have the best backup. I mean, you'll make a Garoppolo case, and certainly they won some games there last year, but you are in a situation that we would not feel good about Ryan Mallett playing this week. We wouldn't. I think you guys would feel okay about McCarron playing, or am I wrong?
I agree with that. I think the Bengals have one of the top 2 or 3 backup quarterbacks in the NFL, but even saying that, 2 years ago when Andy went down, A.J. McCarron did an excellent job. There's no disputing that. But their points per game dropped by 7 from one quarterback to the next. And even in that playoff game against the Steelers, where A.J. had them in position to win, they didn't score a point until the fourth quarter. So an offense that was clicking and was ranked among the NFL's best before Andy got hurt was still okay, but it wasn't nearly as good as it was when Andy was playing at the top of his game.
You watch him every week, and he's kicked our butts a handful of times for sure. Thoughts? Is Dalton underappreciated in some way? And maybe you could say the same thing about Matt Ryan until he started to win and had the Super Bowl sewn up until they didn't run the ball last year. But I guess for any of these quarterbacks, other than the Rodgers and the Brady and the Roethlisberger and the Breeze, the guys that have actually climbed the mountain, even Flacco, who was flawless and has a ring on his hand, and Manning has a couple, right? And it's never good enough, right? You're always back to, well, he's 0-0 and he hasn't won. And in the case of Andy Dalton, that's going to follow him until he starts winning some games in January, right?
Correct. He needs to have postseason success. That's the only thing that's missing on the resume. He's lost every playoff game that he started until he wins a few of them. That knock is going to hang over him. But, that stat in and of itself can be deceiving. If you look back at Joe Flacco's great postseason success, he had a playoff game against the Patriots where he was 4 for 10 and had a passer rating of 10, and the Ravens' defense won the game. In his first playoff game, he was 9 for 23 with no touchdowns and a pick. The Ravens won the game. So it's not just the quarterback. Everybody has to come through to have postseason success. And, in Andy's case, unfortunately, he hasn't played that well in some of those playoff losses, but it wasn't just him. Some of the guys around him have played poorly as well.
Man, you're an interesting cat, like my friend Kenny Albert and like some other folks. Our dear friend up in Detroit does this with the Lions and Michigan football as well. But you're one of the rare cats like flying around doing the Saturday, Sunday thing with the Bearcats and with the Bengals. It must be interesting for your schedule maker when it all comes together in April, right?
My schedule maker is me, and it is interesting. My most nerve-wracking day of the year is the day that the NFL schedule comes out, because at that point I will already know the University of Cincinnati schedule, and now I know just how tricky it's going to get to get from one place to the other.
So give me your toughest layover. Did Wembley screw with you last year a little bit or no? What happened?
Wembley, when the Bengals played in London, I had to miss the University of Cincinnati game that weekend. So that was one where I missed a game. And typically during the course of the year, I'll miss a game, maybe two, where it's just impossible to get from one to the other. That was one of those games. But there are going to be some interesting days and nights this year coming up that I kind of, worry about. The night that I've got to count on a flight to arrive or weather to cooperate, but in the end, it always seems to work out somehow.
Do you have a backup plan? I mean, the only reason I ask that, because, look, I've been doing radio 25 years. There's always a backup plan. It's radio. But when the game's going, you need someone to call the game. I would just say that, you sort of live on the edge. I was a wedding DJ for a long time, and it was never lost upon me, as I left that morning, that there was a bride somewhere and that she needed a DJ. You had to be there. There was no backup plan. There was no safety net for like a flat tire. I mean, literally, right?
Well, I have a lot of backup plans when it comes to my travel. I don't necessarily have a backup plan for me not making it, because what I often say is the first Bengals game that I miss is the last one that I'm ever asked to do. So I make sure that I can get to that Bengals game. Now, like I said, the University of Cincinnati is great in allowing me to miss a game or two every year if I absolutely have to. In fact, I missed their season opener last week because it was on the same night at the same time as the Bengals' final preseason game. And even though it was a preseason game, Bengals games always take priority. So, again, I'll miss a game or two every year. But aside from that, I make sure I'm in my seat ready to go for a Bengals game whenever they kick it off.
All right, man. Save me some of that chili. I'm going to get down there to the Queen City on Sunday, and we're gonna figure this thing out. It's a really interesting game, right? Like I know Vegas has it at 3 points, and nobody really knows what to make of either one of these. And certainly Flacco's got to be one of the great mysteries in the NFL right now, because I don't even think John Harbaugh or Greg Roman or anybody associated with the team actually knows how this is going to go on Sunday, because they haven't seen it before, right?
And I'll be honest with you, to me, it seems like very little is being made of that. Probably outside of Baltimore. I'm sure they're talking about it there, but it seems like the rest of the country, I'm not hearing a lot about how can a quarterback go 70-some days without practicing with his full squad, return the Saturday before the season opener, and expect to do well against one of the NFL's better defenses. As good as the Ravens were defensively last year, and they were great, the Bengals actually gave up fewer points. So I think Joe Flacco is going to have his hands full. To me, the question is, can the Bengals score many points either? Because I really don't think the Ravens are going to get a bunch.
Hey, man, great to visit with you as always. We'll see your partner, Dave Lapham. Tell Marvin we're coming down there to get him this weekend, and we'll do what we do here in the AFC North. We'll go play football and have some fun. Always appreciate your time, Dan. Safe travels to you, my friend.
Thanks, Nestor. Always great to be on with you. Thank you.
You got it. Dan Horde out there in Cincinnati in the Queen City. You can follow him at Dan_Horde, H-O-A-R-D. He is the radio voice of the Bengals as well as the Bearcats of Cincinnati on their basketball and their football side as well. You can find me out in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app. We do come in crystal clear, no static at all. There's my nod to Walter Becker, the late, great Walter Becker. I got a little Steely Dan reference in here for some FM and no static at all. But we are AM 1570, and of course our morning newspaper delivers to your email inbox free digitally each and every morning. That's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life. You can learn more and get some inspiration as the kids have gone back to school. Find that at planetoftriumphs.com. Nasty at WNST.net reaches me. I am a very available individual out on social media. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram. Streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.